Hello everybody, hope you're having a great day. So the last time around we took a look at Plantera and Duke Fishron to see which boss was more difficult. If you haven't seen that video, be sure to check it out after this one's done and join in the discussion. But in this video today, we're going to take a look at the Eater of Worlds versus the Brain of Cthulhu. For the longest time, we had the Corruption and the Eater of Worlds reign supreme, but in patch 1.2 we were introduced to the Crimson and the Brain of Cthulhu arrived on the scene. So today we'll break down and compare both bosses to see which one is the toughest. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions on this down below in the comments section. We love to hear from you as always. And remember, this may vary from person to person. So with that, let's dig right on in with the Eater of Worlds. The Eater of Worlds will be the second boss you face early in pre-hard mode and is a sharp contrast compared to the Eye of Cthulhu. This giant worm beast consists of the head, several body parts, and the tail in the end. The weakest part of the body actually consists of the head with 65 hit points, with the body parts having about 150 hit points and the tail with 220. And of course, in reverse order, the head does the most damage with a base damage of 22, the body does about 13 with the tail doing a base damage of 11. The Eater of Worlds' main attack is basically to burrow underground and try to catch the player off guard. You can actually fight the Eater underground, but it may be a bit tricky since it gives the worm more flexibility. It's recommended to fight it above ground, so that way it forces the Eater up into the air when it charges and gives the players plenty of room to attack and break apart its body. Things get really annoying once the body becomes segmented and you're stuck facing about 3 or 4 parts of it, but it's not really too challenging. Gold armor and meteor armor are pretty good to take on the Eater, but it's not really required. You could probably do this with a lower tier set, and as long as you're careful. The biggest thing here is going to be about weapons. If you can get Vile Thorn for mages from some of these Shadow Orbs, Vile Thorn works amazingly well. Same thing as Water Bolt, it's on the same level, it does a lot of damage, and it's highly recommended. If you're into throwables, shurikens can work pretty good, especially Molotov cocktails. While they've been nerfed from their original damage, they still do a decent amount against the Eater, so it should help a lot. For melee characters, if you can get the Ball of Hurt, that does a ton of damage, especially since it's piercing, so you can take out a lot of segments in a couple of swings without even breaking a sweat. Enchanted Sword and Arcalis are very effective against the Eater, and if you farm up enough hearts to get the Goblin Invasion, you can actually get spiky balls from the goblins and use it against the Eater, and they work rather well too, which is a pleasant surprise. With that same thought, for rangers, if you can get the Harpoon, that works really good for a ranged weapon. With bows, if you can get Jester Arrows, they do piercing damage, which works really great, and Unholy Arrows work especially well too. So you can farm the Eye of Cthulhu and collect some of them, or just farm Devourers for their teeth and upgrade the arrows. Being the second boss in the game, this isn't too challenging, but it is a fun step. Later on we'll talk about the Expert Mode version where things get more difficult. Next up, we have the Brain of Cthulhu, which was released in patch 1.2 with the Crimson. Adding more Cthulhu lore to the game, we have the Brain, which is an interesting equivalent to the Eater. While it doesn't have any segments, it does have companion mobs called creepers that hover around it. In order to progress in this fight, you must destroy all the little creepers, and while they're not particularly strong, they can be quite annoying when they start swarming around. The creepers have about 100 hit points, and they do about 20 points of damage at base. But if you're not careful, you can get yourself cornered and get bombarded by these things. As they each die, they will continue to drop resources, much how the Eater of Worlds segments drop resources. And once they're all gone, we'll move on to Phase 2, where the Brain comes out and starts to attack. In Phase 2, it basically does a melee charge that does 30 base damage, but it does have 1,000 hit points. Like Phase 1, it'll continue to phase in and out all across the room, so you have to be very mindful where it appears. This is going to be more of a test on how well you can do damage on the run. Much like the Eater of Worlds, you could probably do this with gold or platinum tiered armor, or a little bit less, especially if you're dodging and good at getting away from enemies. For mages, once again, Water Bolt is another perfect spell for this fight. If you're lucky to have gotten a Crimson Rod for some of the Crimson Hearts, that works really good, though you may find yourself placing it quite often to maximize damage. If you can craft an Emerald Staff or a Diamond Staff, those will work good in this fight too. And yes, they do work in the Eater of Worlds fight pretty good as well. If you're fortunate to have Meteorite, the Space Gun is another great option if you can make the armor. For rangers, once again, Jester Arrows will work out pretty good, as well as Unholy Arrows. If you can get the Undertaker, that would be really good from one of the Crimson Hearts. And for melee users, well, if you can get the Blade of Grass, that will help out pretty good. Again, this could be another option for the Eater of Worlds. If you've killed enough of the Eye of Cthulhu and made the Blood Butcherer, that will work out really good. If you're fortunate to get the Katana from the Traveling Merchant, that will work. Any normal spear really should be okay. And of course, a flail, just like the Ball of Hurt, would work good. Too bad the Ball of Hurt only spawns in the Corruption. It should be noted if you can get any weapons from the Queen Bee, then they will work out really well against both of these bosses, the Eater and the Brain. Again, the normal version of both of these bosses weren't meant to be extremely challenging, just really to get you into the game and have a good time with it. As for the expert versions though, they're a little bit different. The expert Brain of Cthulhu has 1,700 hit points, and the creepers now have 200 instead of 100. It should also be noted that the creepers now apply status debuffs when you get hit by them, making them a lot more deadly than before, especially if you're a mage trying to cast spells and get hit by silence. In expert mode for the Brain, phase 2 can be tricky because when it loses more health, it begins to have 3 extra mirror images that will appear on screen trying to confuse the player. It's not too difficult at first, but the closer to death the Brain gets, the more images look lifelike, so it can become very challenging at the end. Also, much like the creepers earlier, it can also apply status debuffs, again making this fight more challenging for the likes of mages. Debuffs like Silenced and Weak can wreak a lot of havoc. As for the expert Eater of Worlds, whereas the original had 7,485 hit points, this version has over 10,479. While the tail and the body of the Eater was slightly increased, the head had its damage over doubled, making it the most dangerous part of the body, while the tail has over 300 hit points. The biggest thing about the expert mode Eater of Worlds is that it will now spit vile spit, especially once it's above ground. It will shoot a lot of spit. And while you can stop it with the weapon, it becomes overwhelming when the body starts to come out in full force. You could try fighting it underground where the spit is less, but this still is going to be a fight where you have to do a lot of moving. If you do it above ground, make sure to make yourself an extremely long platform to keep moving because you do not want to stand still for very long. The spit can be overwhelming and the damage piles up very quick. One trick in expert mode that some use is to get a Reaver Shark, go all the way to the underworld, and craft yourself some molten armor to help make this fight easier. Overall, the expert version of both these bosses is no joke, but they are a really good challenge. Overall, I feel like the Eater of Worlds is a really fun boss, and while the Brain is a little bit more challenging and some may find the Brain more difficult, I do get more enjoyment out of it. I would have to say though that I can see the Brain being more difficult for players, especially when the eye starts swarming and going around everywhere. So points to the normal Brain of Cthulhu. Meanwhile, in expert mode, I have to say the more difficult one would probably be the expert Eater of Worlds, just simply because the vile spit can cause a lot of trouble for those who aren't constantly moving or not very familiar with this fight. In the end, I think it's very funny that they tend to flip-flop depending upon what mode of Terraria you play. Either way, I like what each brings to the table. While the Eater of Worlds is fun and a bit segmented, he's still very satisfying to smash. As for the Brain of Cthulhu, I like the Cthulhu aspect it brings, and once again, how satisfying it is to smash the little creepers. Either way, take it for what it's worth. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments section. As always, please be sure to rate the video if you enjoyed it. And if you like these videos we've been doing with the comparison, drop me a line down below. I'd love to hear about it, and we'll have more coming in the future. Thank you again so much for watching. As we've passed over 51,000 subscribers, you guys are really awesome. Have yourselves a wonderful day. I'll see you again next time, and keep your eyes open for another video tomorrow. The video's over, but there's more where that came from. Be sure to subscribe for more Terraria Let's Plays, Top 5s, and other videos as well as we cover different titles. You can click on one of the videos here for more. Be sure to rate this video accordingly as it helps the channel out greatly. Have yourself a wonderful day, and I will see you again next time.